Great Discovery is a 2008 feature film which was released direct to DVD. It was written by Sharon Miller, with the story by Simon Spencer and Sam Barlow, produced by Simon Spencer and directed by Steve Asquith. With Sodor Day fast approaching, Thomas discovers the long-lost station of Great Waterton and becomes jealous of a new tank engine called Stanley. It's a very short synopsis, but that's kind of the gist with movies or any feature-length films. Keep the synopsis short so you can go in and check it out for yourself. Yes, Steamies, I am back to review Thomas and Friends, The Great Discovery. I'm going to start with my initial thoughts on the film, and I really enjoyed it. I actually feel quite sad because this movie felt like they were finding their stride with how to come to terms with the characters, what their storylines would be like, and it felt like that kind of celebration of all model engines before it transitions into the CGI model engine hybrid, and then eventually full CGI after season 12. There was a real sense of go big or go home that came with this film. And what better to make that stamp than getting Pierce Brosnan, James Bond himself, to narrate Thomas and Friends, The Great Discovery. And I think it's only fitting that I start off by mentioning Pierce Brosnan and his narration of this feature film. I absolutely love Pierce Brosnan's voice. I enjoyed it when he was James Bond, and I more than enjoy it now as a narrator. He's got a very calming and soothing voice, which is great for the intended target audience, but he has that gravitas about him to make it seem very dramatic and suspenseful at just the right moments to make The Great Discovery sound like it was a Shakespearean play. Brosnan definitely gave it his all during this film, and he did not phone any of it in. He has a great vocal range, but the only criticism that I have is around the accents. He just can't do them, but it is rather hilarious to watch, because when he's trying to do an accent, for example, like Duncan, it's just hilarious. And I mean that in the nice way, like the Ringo Starr type of hilarious when he tried to be Donald and Douglas in season 2. Great energy, great attempt, but it just sounds so baffling. Although I would definitely say that Angeles has the better vocal range in terms of accents, by this point in the franchise, Brosnan was a breath of fresh air. He was dynamic, he was engaging, he drew you in at suspenseful moments and allowed you to feel a sense of calm when the story needed it. It does make me feel really sad because he was meant to be in season 12 and I think seasons 13 and 14 going onwards as well, but for some reason he didn't stick around. I have my own theory on this, and I think it's down to money. This was around the time of the great financial crisis. The banks had collapsed, everybody's budgets were getting tighter, people were getting laid off, losing their jobs, and I think they just didn't want to pony up the dough for a talent of Brosnan's caliber. Which is a shame, because when you get someone like James frickin' Bond to narrate your film, and you get the option to have him narrate even more going forward, pay the man his money. He deserves it. He's earned it. His credits are in the bank. Give him whatever he wants. Have him do his contract for the next 2 or 3 seasons and maybe a feature movie or 2, and then pleasantly say goodbye. So that's my piece on the narrator, and now I'm going to go into specific points of the film itself that I liked, or that maybe I didn't like, or what could be improved upon. So I'll start at the very start with the first song, Thomas and James Are Racing. In my opinion, this song was just way too long to start with. It had the right tempo, it had the right energy about it, but you could have just cut it down a bit. We all would have been much better off. The chorus was drilled into my head and I couldn't sleep for 2 days because it was running through it constantly. Good earworm, but bad when you're trying to get some rest, man. The scene where Thomas is trying to cross the bridge and it's basically collapsing around him, that is some of the best voiceover and incidental music I have seen done in Thomas and Friends to this point. The way they structured the scene was so suspenseful, and you were genuinely scared that something bad was going to happen to Thomas. In your heart you know it's not going to, because Thomas is the main character, but for just that tiny little moment you felt like something was going to go down. The voiceover work was Shakespearean in its delivery, the score was fantastic, props for the commitment. Now I move on to when Thomas found Great Waterton. That set design was extremely impressive. A lot of people don't realise that it actually takes more time to make a city look dilapidated, rustic, and in need of restoration than it is just to build something that looks brand new from scratch. You could tell there was a lot of love dedicated to this. And the fact that they're expanding the lore of Sodor, going into its 12th season, is something that I just have to give props to. Even though they probably knew they were on the way out, they still delivered a high quality product here. Only little nitpick that I had was that Thomas and his friends had all heard stories about Great Waterton. It was the first we were ever hearing of it. But luckily, the Fat Controller was there to give some great exposition for all of us who felt really dumb. I understand why it was done, it just made me feel quite stupid. But its intended target audiences is for kids, and they need things explained to them sometimes, so I can't exactly complain on that. Now this special had something that I had been craving for since calling all engines. A plethora of cameos. The ones that I had noted specifically were all the narrow gauge engines, Madge, Jack in the Pack, Harold, Arthur, Rosie in a background shot, Cranky, Harvey, Terence, Trevor, Molly, Bill and Ben, Salty, Rocky, Bertie, Butch the Breakdown Car in the background, Harry, Bert, Mavis, Diesel, Dennis, and even Diesel frickin' 10. So many cameos, and it just filled my heart with glee. The song There's a Job for Everyone. This is the type of song that you want in a Thomas movie. Short, snappy, catchy, and just really good. Then we move on to Stanley's introduction. I love his basis, I like his livery, but I feel bad for any new character at this point going forward because we all know what the deal's gonna be. He's the generic new character that Thomas won't like. It seems like Stanley's taking his place, makes Thomas jealous, Thomas winds up doing something incredibly stupid, or makes an engine do something incredibly stupid. You guys get it, I mean we've been here before, right? The runaway truck sequence that led into the accident with the tower at Great Waterton was really well executed. I've got to say, it's one of the best crashes that I had seen at the hit era at this point. You've done good. I do think it's a little bit extreme that everyone turns their back on Thomas after this though. What none of the characters realise during this era is that if it isn't for their reaction to how Thomas acts, he usually doesn't end up in the situations that he's in. The other engines made Thomas feel bad by talking about Stanley like he was God's gift or something. If they hadn't done that in the first place, none of the preceding events would have happened. What really annoys me about this era in particular is that the engines never think about how their words could have an effect on somebody's actions going forward in the story. They don't stop and think, if I hadn't actually said that to Thomas, he wouldn't have had insert crash from the entire hit era. There really needs to be more accountability for the engines, and it just wasn't there this time. The mine scene was an interesting one because it goes from being very happy and playful one minute to extremely dark and depressing the next. This is down to not only the very creepy visuals, but Brosnan's impeccable voiceover work during this scene. The delivery of his lines had a lot of classic era vibes to them, so I was really impressed with it. Now we come to the song Where Oh Where Is Thomas. I didn't like the song. It felt really out of place. For me, it stopped the film stone dead. And there was a random part where the kids start singing that Thomas is having a whale of a time trapped in a mine. He was having a good time, but by this point in the story, he is now absolutely terrified. To me, it felt like the song just took away from all the dramatic tension that was built up in the previous scene. I know it probably wasn't intentional, and Robert Hartshorn does a great job with any musical scores that he's done, but it just didn't land this time, guys. Especially because in the next scene it goes back to being dark and dramatic, so it made the song feel even more out of place. The slow motion close-up shots of Thomas in the water are really creepy, at least for me. I felt very uncomfortable watching those slow-mo shots. And then he crashes through some bushes and goes flying over a ravine. That felt a bit like Fast and Furious 7 for me. You know, the whole cars don't fly. Just felt like at that point the laws of physics decided that they were going to go and take a holiday. But again, it was executed well, so I can't say too much on it. How can Thomas blow his whistle when he doesn't have any fire, so he can't make the steam, and there's no driver and fireman in it? Once again, the laws of reality out the window. I know that it's a kids' film, but if Pierce Brosnan's in it, I still have to hold it to a higher standard. It's Pierce Brosnan. And then we come to the final scene. Great Waterton is restored to its full glory. Stanley gets to bring the mayor of Sodor to the opening, and everyone is there in background shots, whistling, tooting their horns. This felt like the finale to the model era that we should have had. Because then we get the model CGI hybrid kind of thing, and I'll go into that in my season 12 video. Then we come to the engine roll call, and of course they had to squeeze Stanley in for that one. It does make sense. It's the Great Discovery. He's the new character. And then we come to the final song of the film, Thomas, You're the Leader. When The Great Discovery came out in 2008, I was 21 years old. I just started my rekindling of my love of Thomas and Friends after the whole societal pressure phase that I've talked about previously. My cousin was quite young and he had taken the mantle on of Thomas fan. So when he got The Great Discovery, of course, being the responsible cousin that I am, I went down and watched it with him. And when I first heard this song, I really did not like it. I did not believe that rap should be in Thomas and Friends. I felt like they were trying to overcompensate with modernising Thomas by putting rap music in it. To me, that just felt really forced. It wasn't for me at the time. However, it has now been 15 years since I watched The Great Discovery. My own opinions and my own tastes have changed in that time, and now I really enjoyed that song. I'm still a bit hesitant about having rap in Thomas and Friends, not gonna lie, but I had a greater appreciation for it now, especially since in that time I have also learned about music production and how to create songs, and I know the time and the dedication it would have took to make that look as good as it did and sound as fresh as it did. But one thing that hasn't changed about my opinion of that song is that the chorus is absolute fire. Those vocals are perfection. Chris Madden, who is the singer on this, has such a fantastic vocal range. This song, in my opinion, has actually aged very well over time, and it's 10 times better than half the crap they put out in the charts today. To Chris Madden, the original performer, and to Peter Woodruff and Charlie Grant, who wrote the song, very well done. And that's it, Steamies. I have now reviewed Thomas and Friends, The Great Discovery. So what did you think of The Great Discovery? Where does it rank in your own personal rankings of Thomas and Friends feature films? Let me know in the comments below as always. And until next time, keep on chugging.